Facebook Live weekend on the Valley's next generation of news talk. PowerTalk 96.7 FM and 1400 AM. Here's Rich Rodriquez.
Good morning, 56 degrees in Fresno. We're looking for a high today of 81. PureSense Environmental Inc. is a Fresno-based company supplying proprietary state-of-the-art irrigation and field monitoring solutions to agriculture since 2006. Its second location in Oakland is home to its software development team that's dedicated to keeping PureSense at the forefront of soil moisture and weather monitoring technology. Company employs 32 people. Dave Jamison is the senior agronomist for PureSense. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
How you doing, Rich?
Tell us a little bit about PureSense.
Well, PureSense has been around for about 7 years. We have sites, soil moisture monitoring sites, from all the way from Mexico all the way up to Washington. We have some sites in Florida, some in Texas. But our main goal, our sweet spot, is right here in the Central California, as far as monitoring soil moisture and irrigation management, within a ranch, internal water management. As you spoke earlier about all the things going on with the government and all the regulations, for myself personally, that's so confusing. I mean, you almost have to be an attorney to figure out what is going on with the water. Well, our goal is once we get the water, whatever the allocation is, let's use it wisely. Let's go ahead and let's understand it as a resource, and it's something that's the most limiting factor in crop growth and development. And with the technology that's out there today, we can really get a handle on, what's going on in the soil profile, what's going to happen in the future as far as what the crop is going to need. So our main focus right now is soil moisture probes that actually talk to the phone, they talk to your computer, everything's in real time, and it's really a big jump in the evolution of the technology to manage water and know what's going on in the ground.
You're one of the new guys on the team, so prior to this, what were you doing?
I started doing this back in the late 80s. And let me give a brief, before I go into my personal background. The evolution of actually looking at water on the ranch and looking what's happening in the soil profile as a business, it's come a long ways. When I first got into it in the late 80s, it was a relatively new, type of business. Back in the 50s and 60s and perhaps 70s, if you wanted to irrigate, you just look at the tree and you go, okay, it's hot. I better put some water on. I look at the tree, okay, it looks happy. I better stop the water, okay? And there was a lot of research that was done to where they started to recognize, how much is a crop going to use in a certain amount of time, forward. And guys started doing consulting, and which was kind of crazy. I might be wrong on my timeline, but back in the 70s or so, people were making a living of telling growers how to water, which is, kind of a niche type of career. But back then, all they had was basically a shovel, and we had a soil probe. You'd push it in the ground, and you'd feel the soil in your hands, and you go, okay, it's kind of dry, so let's go ahead and do this. When I got into it, there was a lot of computer models. Computers were just starting, back in everybody had the orange screens and the...
Was that with all the cards, too?
And the green screens and all that. But nonetheless, it started to take on. We had ways of figuring out how to test a soil moisture that wasn't subjective, like with your feel of your hand. It's something called a neutron probe, which uses radiation, which is kind of scary. And you put a hole in the ground, which goes straight down 5 feet, and you read it, and it tells you how much water is in the ground. That was back in the 90s, was the best type of technology we had. And then somebody came along with capacitance probes, which does the same type of thing without the radiation, except it does one thing different. It has a cell phone connected to it, and it keeps calling into the into computers. And that's kind of what the technology that we use here at PureSense is, the capacitance probe with the telemetry. It every 15 minutes it takes a reading of your soil moisture profile, sends it back to your computer, and then you can actually see water move into the ground. You can actually see the tree take the water up in real time. So it's came a long ways. And before I came at PureSense, I was that guy. I was the guy that was your irrigation consultant. I would have clients, they'd call me up, I'd tell them how much to water every week, and I did that for a number of years. And I went to after I got out of graduate school, I went to a large scale farm in southern Kern County, probably 15,000 acres of cherries, almonds, walnuts, raisins, citrus, pistachios. And at that point in time, I was my own client. So I wasn't doing consulting, but, I was consulting for myself. I learned a lot actually being on the ranch and understood what it takes to operate a large-scale farm. There's a lot of things going on when you operate a large-scale farm. It's not just the water, it's the labor, it's the equipment, it's fertilizers, pesticides, regulations, and a lot of experience in understanding what it takes to farm something like that. And, water is obviously one of the most important parts. So taking that experience from the consulting to understanding what it takes to operate a large ranch, and then move that here to a company that's helping a lot of people across the state where water is our main focus. So now at PureSense, I'm trying to take what I learned as a private consultant and then being on a large ranch and then move that into a company that has a lot of horsepower with software development and a lot of technology. So it's really exciting for me to be part of this new team.
Do you just work with the large growers, or can you work with the small guys? How does that go?
It doesn't matter, large or small or medium. Understanding what's going on with your soil profile, watching water, move into the profile, move out of the profile. It's for anybody growing, and it's a really big help. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. There's a lot of decisions growers have to make nowadays, and our job is to make sure that the water decision is covered.
When you have a probe in the ground, how many, like say you have 100 acres, how many probes do you have to have in the ground to be able to monitor, the way you're watering and to see it, that it's effective and that you're keeping a good eye on the ground?
Well, you'd first have to establish whatever your irrigation set is. So whatever is irrigated at the same time, that's what we call a set. A 100-acre field may have one set, meaning you irrigate all 100 acres at the same time. It may be split into two sets with 50 and then 50. Generally, we recommend that you're going to put a probe in every irrigation set that you're going to make an irrigation decision on. So it just depends on the size of your irrigation set. If the 100-acre field only had one set, we would put one there. Now, consider this: that when you're looking to monitor something in the ground, and it's only monitoring one tree, it's monitoring one emitter, so you have to be really smart on where you put this soil probe. There's variations that you can control, and there's variations you can't control. The ones you can't really control is soil type. If you got a sand streak in the field, then it's going to react differently. Sand does not hold as much water as a heavier soil. So that's something that's out of your control. Something that is in your control is your irrigation system. And, to irrigate 100 acres of almonds, say, for instance, you have to, in a pressurized environment, when that water comes out of your pumping station and it goes into the underground pipe and it comes out into your risers and it goes through the tubing and out the emitters, every single tree is not going to get the same amount of water. It's never going to happen. So what we do is before we even put a system in, or actually this is a new service that we're providing, is something called distribution uniformity. And we go out and we basically give your irrigation system a checkup. You mentioned earlier about the allocations being less, and you mentioned check your pumps. What we're saying is check your pumps and also check your irrigation system and make sure that water that you're putting out is as even as possible. Because I've seen a lot of situations where a grower would turn the field on and say, okay, water's coming out of the emitters. It's all good. We actually go out and measure everything in the field. We test pressures all the way throughout the field, and they're varying a lot of times if the maintenance isn't right, because a lot of these irrigation the emitters, they're pressure sensitive. More pressure, more water. Less pressure, less water. And so we'll go out and test all the pressures. We'll go out and we'll actually, for about 50 different spots in the field, measure the water in a certain amount of time, and we give you some distribution uniformity. Once we realize where the uniformity is, then we show that to the grower and we say, okay, this is where it's weak, this is where it's not weak. Then we overlay that information with your soil types, and then we come up with a smart way to decide where we're going to put that one probe, because you got all your eggs in one basket. So now we control the things we can control. If their system has a really bad distribution uniformity, we ask them to fix it. Then we'll put the probe in the ground. So now that when you have these trends of water going in and out of the soil, you can be assured that that's representative of the rest of the field.
I take it that probe is like gold.
It is, absolutely, because first off, they're not necessarily cheap. but the information you get out of them is invaluable. So being smart on where you put this probe, it can only help you. You don't want to be misled by it. Say, for instance, you put it in a part of the field where the pressure is low, it's going to give you drier readings all year long, and then your decisions are going to be skewed to the dry, and you might be over-irrigating other parts of the field.
So who keeps an eye on it now? Is it the foreman that's in charge, or do you send somebody to class and say, okay, here's how you read this cell phone?
Yeah, we do have training, and I have a support staff that once a sale is made, then we have staff that comes out and trains you, let you know how to look at these soil monitors, what they mean, and what they, how they can help you. So in other words, we have every single foot has a graph that shows you volumetric soil moisture, and it kind of goes up and it kind of goes down, and then we set boundaries to where you're at field capacity or where you have the onset of stress, and as that line goes up, you're getting wetter. As it goes down, you're getting drier. That is for anybody. Generally, we have foremen looking at it. Our software is in Spanish because when it comes down to it, the guy turning the water on is usually of Hispanic origin, and so we have it in Spanish, and we like him to see what's going on. Also, the owners can look at it. Anybody can look at it. So, and we do have the training to help these guys understand what they're looking at.
Do you specialize in like row crops or just trees or what?
Our main focus is permanent crops. And the reason being is because, in annual crops, you have an expanding root zone, meaning it may start off as a transplant, and then the roots grow and grow and grow until the end of the season. So in order to understand what's going on, we'd prefer to have the root zone be set. And that's permanent crops lends itself to that. So if you have an annual crop, you put it too far away from the plant early on in the season, you won't be reading any uptake of water. But if you put it really close to the plant later on in the season, you're going to get a bigger mass of roots right there underneath the plant, and it might give you a false reading that way. But we do a lot of stuff in annual crops if you understand the limitations of that expanding root zone. So permanent crops is our main focus, and it is more important in permanent crops to understand the water, because say in a year like this or like last year or any other year in the future where allocation is never going to be 100%. It's never. If you have permanent crops in the ground, it's not like you're going to take them out and not irrigate for a year as you would with annual crops. You just, I just won't grow this 150 acres of tomatoes because I don't have the water. If you've got almonds in the ground and you've got an investment in that crop, or even say pistachios where you won't even get your first harvest till 7 years after you plant it, permanent crops is where our main focus is, because you have to make it through those bad years, and you have to know where your water's at, and you have to know when you can actually deficit irrigate. You mean under irrigate if you don't have the full allocation. There's certain times of the year, specifically like in almonds, where you can give it very little water and not hurt the bottom line. So that's why we like to go in permanent crops, because it's much more important to recognize your water status.
With your system, is there a way that you can project how much water a grower can save over the course of a year?
Yeah, we can. We have budgets, so you can have a budget is incredibly strong. I mean, you have to have a budget with water, and I'm not sure how many growers actually have that. When I was down south, we have a budget. You're going to say I need X amount of inches, say 48 inches for almonds, and that's my budget. And if you read your meters and you look at the probes, you can see where you're at in comparison to the budget at any time of the year. And at the end of the year, if you can grow almonds on 42 inches when you budgeted 48, then you save 6 inches of water. And 6 inches of water, half an acre foot, at $150 to $200 an acre foot, or even higher down south, that could be a huge amount of money.
Now, I know you're the senior agronomist, and you're not a salesperson, but what kind of money are we talking about for a system like this?
Generally, one of these systems without a weather station, because I haven't mentioned weather stations yet, but we do have a weather station on top, you're looking somewhere around the $5,000 range for one system. And then every year you have to pay for the telemetry for our service and support. If these things break, we have to send a guy out to fix them. So runs you about $800 a year. and it varies, 800 to 1,000 a year, depending on how many sites you got. If you got a lot of sites, it's obviously discounted. But so yeah, it's a big investment. But if you look at what it's protecting, it's protecting a resource which is water, which is not cheap, and secondarily, it's that water is growing a commodity that's going to make you a lot of money, or possibly make you a lot of money. So in the big picture, yeah, it sounds like a lot, but really, it's protecting your investment.
Now, when you talk about sites, how many sites would you need? And I'm just throwing out acreage here. Say a couple hundred acres. How many sites would you need?
If it's depends on the set. If it's 100-acre set and another 100-acre set, you just need 2. And if the soil type is very even, I would just put one on each 100 acres. I know that sounds like you're really putting your eggs in a basket, but if you understand your irrigation system, you understand your soil type, you could make valid decisions off of that probe.
Got a lot more questions for you. We're talking with Dave Jamison. He's with Pure Sense, and Ag Life Weekend will continue in a couple of minutes.
I'm Greg Mills, and this is Dairy Line, an integral part of dairy business communications, with our weekly recap of Dairy Line Radio. This is Dairy Line Rewind. Monday on Dairy Line.
Arkansas dairy producer Ryan Anglin joins us again this week to talk about the partnerships that the dairy industry is involved with, including McDonald's, and I just had an Angus burger.
And what's funny is that dairy actually helped develop the Angus burger and not the beef industry. And we want to partner with everybody. We wish that we could do a better job partnering with beef, because we're all in this together. We're all agriculture, and we're shrinking numbers of agriculture. And the more that we can work together, the more it'll be to all of our benefits.
Yeah, some powerful partnerships, though. You're talking about some big names, and that's really got to help the dairy industry. And dairy producers really should be proud, because this is something that has been established through the years, right?
Well, yes, and it's, like $1 of our money and $7 of their money. And then we're growing that because they see the value, they're putting more dollars, and we're not having to increase. We're putting more dollars in, but they're putting more dollars in. And it's just a tremendous partnership for everybody.
Tuesday.
Early last week, prices were down. We had the black barrel average down to, I believe it was just above 154. And then we had a nice reversal where we finished basically at the high for the week. We closed out last week at a 159 black barrel average. And then, we're adding a little bit of gains on that. There was some offering of both blocks and barrels, started off at higher price levels to see if any buyers would bite at it. Nobody did, but as soon as our offers dropped down to Friday's closing prices, buying interest got real aggressive, and so buyers were well defended where we finished off last week.
So where do we go from here? Are we going to see these prices kind of stick around in this area?
Well, last week's reversal is supportive of seeing some additional strength here, giving us good odds of seeing some additional strength here this week. Our thought process is that we can work up towards 175, 180 on cash cheese. World markets have been ticking up a little bit. Oceania average cheddar price, I believe, is up to about 184 a pound. That had been kind of hanging out around 180, 181 for a number of months, and has now finally started to tick up a little bit. The Fonterra Global Dairy Trade Auction also saw cheddar make a pretty good bump up here this week, where I believe that's up close to around 173.
Wednesday.
What are some of the challenges and success stories of the beef industry here in California?
One of the biggest challenges we have in California is probably our budget compared to the number of consumers that we're trying to market to. Every time cattle are sold, $1 per head comes to our office, and then we forward 50 cents of that dollar to the Cattlemen's Beef Board. Of that 50 cents that we keep in state, we have a program budget of about $1.3 million. And so when we look at that compared to the 37 million consumers we have in California, we're looking at about 3 cents per consumer to market beef to them.
What about some of your programs that you're doing?
In the consumer outreach, public relations area, that includes nutrition outreach. We just hired a registered dietitian on staff, and so she's working a lot with the American Heart Association, California Dietetic Association. We're ramping up our social media and trying to engage consumers more online.
Thursday.
Chris, the sequestration is hitting close to home now. What are you hearing in Washington?
Well, what the USDA announced earlier this week, Bill, is that they're going to be suspending certain statistical reports because of the lost dollars as a result of the budget sequestration process that started at the beginning of March. Now, they're eliminating, in a few cases, just a couple monthly reports, like the June rice stocks, also the July cattle report, which has some bearing on the dairy industry because it's all cattle, including beef as well as dairy cattle, and then some very minor things involving chickpeas and winter peas and mink. But the big one in all this is that they are going to be eliminating the monthly milk production report from March, including this month's report, all the way through September, which is the end of the current fiscal year.
And Friday.
In a report titled California Dairies Getting More Moolah, Rabobank economists Vernon Crowder and James DeYoung, dairy industry analyst, put much of the blame for current problems on the state's 7-decade-old milk marketing order system. They say the system has distorted milk prices and revenue distribution, discouraged investment in processing capacity and technology, and encouraged overproduction of milk. And with prices following the volatility of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, processors have stayed with staple products such as non-fat dry milk, butter, and cheddar cheese.
Have a great weekend. For Dairy Line, I'm Greg Mills. Dairy Line on Dairy Business Radio.
Attention, the International Agency for
Look how sad your smartphone is, because it doesn't have iHeartRadio. It can't listen to 1,500 live radio stations. It can't make its own custom music stations. It can't even use the Perfect 4 feature. No wonder it's sad. I may weep myself. But you can cheer that phone up. Download the iHeartRadio app now. It's free at iHeartRadio.com. iHeartRadio is now available on Roku.
Hello, everyone. This is Bill Manders, and glad to be back. And I've got to tell you, while I was in the hospital, I definitely missed something. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but laying in my hospital bed made me only want to be in my Tempur-Pedic bed even more. If you've been thinking about getting a Tempur-Pedic bed, let me just go on record as telling you it is the best bed I've ever slept in and the most recommended bed in America. And my friends at Fashion Furniture can provide you with all the information you need on a Tempur-Pedic bed that best suits your needs. I wouldn't tell you if I didn't mean it.
Ag Live Weekend on the Valley's next generation of news talk. PowerTalk 96.7 FM and 1400 AM. Here's Rich Rodriquez.
Happy Saturday morning. It's about 23 minutes before 8 o'clock. My guest this morning is Dave Jamison with Pure Sense Environmental Incorporated. They're in Fresno, and they also have an office in Sacramento. Or no, I take it back. It's not Sacramento. It's Oakland. Tell us a little again about Pure Sense and what you guys do.
Yeah, Pure Sense has been here in the Valley, been around for about 7+ years. We do soil moisture monitoring. We sell technology that goes into your field that looks at water movement into the soil and uptake of water, from evapotranspiration or actually transpiration from the plant. And it's a really exciting technology. It has been around for a little more than 7 years, actually, since the mid to late 90s, but we have software that is easy to understand, easy to use, and make your irrigation decisions not only based off of what a soil probe is telling you, but other aspects of it as far as projecting out how much water you're going to need in the future.
I guess when you talk about the soil probe, and it's really hard for me to visualize, and I'm a kid that used to watch my grandpa and my dad walk the furrows over, oranges and plums, and kind of, checking the dirt and everything and seeing how much penetration there is in the ground. And what you're telling me is that on 100 acres, if you've got water that's being distributed at the same time, you can have this probe in one particular area and can tell you what kind of penetration you're getting, how that tree's doing, just based on one probe.
Yeah, it's a question we get all the time because it's a big investment to put this technology into your field. You're looking at one tree, you're looking at one emitter, and you're looking at one slice of the soil profile. We all know that water doesn't go out evenly in the fields, and again, as I explained earlier, we are going to do a distribution uniformity test. We look at how the water's spread out. But again, that's not the whole piece of the irrigation puzzle. It's a part of it. We also have technology to where we read the meter. So even that 100-acre field does have a pumping station, and there is a meter connected to that pumping station. So we look at the volume of water over a single irrigation event that goes out to that 100 acres, for instance. And if that volume of water over that irrigation event is going to match what the tree is going to use, and this is, on paper, because we can, on paper, you can figure out, there's a lot of studies that, say almonds are going to use, 0.3 inches of water in one day, or 2.1 inches of water in a week. So we need to put out 2.1 inches of water in that week, and our system, say, can do that in 60 hours. So we look at the slug of water that goes out in the field, and then that one tree validates what we thought we were supposed to do. So if I want to put out, 2 inches in a week, I did my 2 inches in a week, which I know on paper is going to cover my crop's use. The soil probe is going to validate that by, showing no stress or staying, static or not changing at all, because the water in matches the water out. If it does not, then I look harder at the probe, and then we move the probe. If it's not showing what we want, perception versus reality. So reading the meter, to me, it covers a whole 100 acres, and it's incredibly important. In my experience going up and down the state, there's some pumps out there with no meters, and the ones that do have meters on it, I'm talking, it reads acre feet that goes out to your field. They're not often read as much as they should. And this is the meter that you have that's managing your water that's going into the field. So there's a financial aspect to it. There's an agronomic aspect to it. And it just lets you know if you're getting close to what you want to do. And I had some experience down south. I can explain when I was reading my own meters, found out how bad of an irrigator I was, because it actually told me how much I didn't put on when I thought I was putting something on.
So you were underwatering? I
was underwatering in some cases. And yeah, I've burned my share of fields, trust me.
So with this technology, that can't happen?
No, we will attach a cell phone to your meter. So now you have, every time the water turns on, every time it turns off, we know how much water goes to that whole 100 acres. The spot in the field that does have the soil probe is talking to the software. So those two together, if they validate each other, then you've done a decent job of irrigating that week. And say, for instance, if you don't have the water, there's no sense on putting more on and not knowing it until after the fact. So the technology of reading the meter, having the telemetry to come back to your system, having it in the field, covers a lot of your decision making.
How often does it send it back, the information to your cell phone?
Every 15 minutes. So this is one thing that I could never do as a consultant. When I was a consultant, I can only go to your field once or twice or maybe 3 times a week, and it's snapshots in time. So if I as a consultant, I would come out to your field, I'd probe it, and I see what's happening right now today, and then I'd go to another field, but things change, throughout the period of a week as water's moved in and moved out of the soil profile. Understanding what happens every 15 minutes gives you an idea of how long it might take to get to the certain root zone that you want to refill to. Say, your viable root zone is 5 feet. Okay, 5 feet in almonds. Most of your water is going to be taken up in that profile. There's no reason to irrigate 6 feet or 7 feet or 8 feet because a lot of that water is going to be lost. And keep in mind, all of our fertilizers go through the water nowadays. The pressurized system, you inject the fertilizer at the pump. So not only you're having your resource of water, which is expensive, oh, by the way, it's got expensive fertilizer in it. So if you can understand how long it takes to get to a certain depth, then you would cease your irrigation at that point. So that way you wouldn't waste water, so to speak. That's one thing I couldn't really do as a consultant, because if I came out there on a Tuesday and it's at 3 feet, I have no idea whether or not it went to 4 and 5 and 6 feet until I come back the next week, and then I find out, oh, geez, it's wet way down there. So having every 15 minutes, allows you to understand those types of things. Infiltration rates.
How about we hear the word evapotranspiration? Does it take that into account too?
Absolutely. That's and we call it ET, and it's it's in the Fresno B. Sometimes they list it. It's a measurement of crop use, and it takes it in two components, which is evaporation. You put water onto a field, it's going to evaporate, and then the process of transpiration, which is the uptake of water through the roots and then through the tree and out the undersides of the leaves, called the stomates. Those two numbers together are measured in inches per foot, and every day there's a mathematical equation based on a lot of different things that measures what ET was that day. So in the middle of summer, it's probably 0.3 inches, which is really high. So every day that tree, if you look at an acre, a full acre, and you flattened it out, and it'd be filled up 0.3 inches. That's how much is going to come out of that acre every day. So you have to put 0.3 inches into the system. And there's also water that's held in the soil profile that the tree can use, but at some point that's going to be depleted. So you have to keep matching. We always say keep matching ET, match ET. And that's in our software also. There's a lot of good models out there that allow you to say, this is what I want to do. I've got a system that can do this, and then you map out your whole week. You try to match ET.
With a system like this, is it a hard sell, or do you see growers, because of the water supply and how it's never 100%, that they're buying into it?
Well, there is a sticker shock, as you were saying. Gee whiz, this is one tree, but once you get used to it and once you start looking at the system, it's initially a hard sell, but then after you get some in the ground, it's well, I don't know what's going on in this field, so I need to put a site there. It's, again, you do have to understand the limitations of it, because it is the one tree, and you have to constantly look. Boots on the ground are always never going to be replaced. It doesn't mean you never go out in the field. It doesn't mean you just sit at your computer all day long and go pump on, pump off. I'm the best farmer in the world. It's not that. And the good growers, they're in the field all the time anyways. This is just an aid for them. But as far as the cell, it's as water is, it's always been a limiting resource. It's not going to get any better. We all know that. It's going to be something that's more of a necessity to understand what's going on out there.
Have a lot of competition out there in the field?
Yes. There are other companies doing this. But what we're trying to look at is the whole irrigation approach, which is not a soil probe in the ground. It is reading the meters. It's looking at, when you make an irrigation decision, you're always looking at the past, the present, and the future. So if I'm making an irrigation decision today, I'm looking at what happened last week. I'm looking at what's happening right now on the soil probe, and I'm looking at what's going to happen forward with, ET projections. We're trying to incorporate that all into our software, which is different than perhaps some of the other companies, to where it's just as the graph goes up, you're getting wet. Oh wow, look, it's going down, you're getting dry. There's more to it than that, and we're incorporating that into the software.
And you say a lot of times, based on the water you're using and the penetration and things like that, that it can forecast the kind of water that you might need later in the season.
Yeah, if you're if you're reading your meters, then you know where you're at on budget at all time. So at the beginning of the year, you set your budget up, and if you're reading your meters, you know where you're at against that budget. I had some experience down south when I was, I had a 40,000 acre foot budget. So do the math on 40,000 acre foot budget.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah, it's millions of swimming pools, and that's $150, $200 an acre foot. I'm in the millions of dollars of a resource that I'm doling out at a certain time, and stuff like that. You don't have that kind of money. Even the large growers, you may have to get a loan to pay your water bill. So if for instance, I have a budget that says I'm going to need a certain amount of water, and I fall under that budget, I'm saving water. They still had to secure that money to buy it, so they're paying interest on water that they didn't really need. So if I can get rid of water early, and I know that I'm either can get rid of it or buy it, whatever way you are, from a financial point of view, it makes the business run better, because it's. I knew in some cases down south in early June that I was going to be out of water in early October, so we bought water at a better price than when everybody else realized, oh geez, we're out of water, let's go buy it. Then the price is double or whatever.
My guest is Dave Jamison with Pure Sense, and Ag Life Weekend will continue in just a minute.
When we found out my girlfriend was pregnant, we were scared. A social worker at Infinite Prague Adoption Service offered support and confidential counseling. We got information to help make the decision that was right for us.
If you or someone you know needs help, call Infinite Prague at 447-3333.
Are your fields suffering from leaf burn, stunted plants, decreased yields and quality, or just overall lack of vigor? While you might be following a strict plant nutrition program to fight these issues, Irrigation Matters can help you with your single largest amendment: water. Your soil is only as good as the water you're applying. Irrigation Matters has seen water quality change in the valley and knows how it affects your soil and overall plant health. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. Their team creates personalized programs to get the most out of your specific water situation with one goal in mind: to make water simple again. There is still time to make changes that can affect your 2013 crop. Call Irrigation Matters at 559-686-4425 today to schedule a free consultation meeting with an Irrigation Matters team member. From the creators of Agua Flaca, Irrigation Matters, a TAP family company serving the Valley since 1992.
Look how sad your smartphone is because it doesn't have iHeartRadio. It can't listen to 1,500 live radio stations. It can't make its own custom music stations. It can't even use the Perfect 4 feature. No wonder it's sad. I may weep myself. But you can cheer that phone up. Download the iHeartRadio app now. It's free at iHeartRadio.com. iHeartRadio is now available on Roku.
Valley's next generation of news talk. PowerTalk 96.7 FM and 1400 AM. Here's Rich Rodriquez.
Have I mentioned every week that I love the Beatles? And they are the greatest rock and roll group ever. Ever. Yep, it plays in my car all the time. My guest is Dave Jamison. He is with Pure Sense. You were going to talk about weather stations. How does that all work?
Well, as we're looking at soil profiles, we have probes in the ground, and we also have a weather station to go on top of, which just is one that you would see at the airport or whatever. It's got the wind, the rain, temperature, humidity, solar radiation. So we're looking at every 15 minutes what's happening on the weather, because it depends. Sometimes it depends on what cloud you're under, and there's a lot of local climatic differences between fields. So understanding what's going on your 100 acres might be different than the guy next to you on his 100 acres. And a good example is we have crop modeling that uses the weather stations to make very important decisions, non-irrigation decisions, like for instance in cherries. We have, there's a model. First off, let me talk a little bit about cherries here. For the whole world, there is no cherries for a certain time of the year, and the first cherries that come off in North America are right here in San Joaquin Valley in the southern Kern County. So there's a huge demand when those cherries come off. They harvest them on one day, they'll be in Japan the next day, and the price is really good. So using the weather stations to model when these cherries are going to be ready or when you can wake them up is highly important to a lot of these cherry growers, and the local differences necessitates having a weather station. Not just using one from AccuWeather or using one from the government or CIMIS, which is a state-run weather service. It's highly important to have that information, especially in cherries, understanding when to wake them up. I can get into it more if you want, but
sure.
Cherries, as all crops, they need a certain amount of chilling during the winter, and the chilling makes the buds viable in the springtime when they when they have enough heat units to open up and bloom and become a viable cherry. And all trees need a certain amount of chilling. Now cherries, they have a really high amount of chilling that they need to get in order to have viable buds. And as you go further down south and south and south towards the end of the grapevine, there's some years they get enough cold and some years they don't get enough cold. And the idea is if you think they have enough chilling, then you apply a rest-breaking agent. It's called Dormex, and that wakes the tree up. So the sooner you can wake the tree up, the sooner it's going to be harvested. And if there's no cherries in the whole world for a couple of months, you're going to be
You
first
want to be
in line.
right on time, yeah.
And you're going to be, so everybody tries to jump the gun and wake their tree up early in mid to late January. The problem is, if you wake it up, rest breaking agents, before it's ready to be woken up, you won't have a crop.
Let's hold off on the cherries for just a second. Linda's on the line from Fresno. Linda, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I have two questions. My first question is, can you explain what a crop coefficient is? I understand what coefficients are, but I don't understand it in terms of a crop coefficient. And then could you also explain, give me a visual of per acre, like the water per acre feet? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, let me talk about crop coefficients first off. I explained earlier about ET, and ET is a measurement of how much water grass is going to use. In other words, it's called ETO. It's your reference ET. So what the measurement is if you look at, say, a square yard of grass, it's completely covered with green material. It's grass. And then you look at how much that grass is going to use over, say, a 24-hour period. And that is a measurement. That's reference ET. Now, that in combination with your crop coefficient kind of adjust it for specific types of crops, because some crops, for instance, almonds in early July, are going to use more than grass. So it's a K factor. That's your crop coefficient. So if, let's just say ETO, your reference ET is 0.3 for the day, and then your crop coefficient is 1.1. That's an adjustment for each of your specific crops. So in other words, you're saying that those almonds are going to use 10% more water than your reference ET. And that goes throughout the whole year, is your crop coefficient. So whatever ETO is, and every crop has a different crop coefficient. Sometimes we call them crop curves or KCs. So that's your strategy to project in the future. So if I know my ET for the next 7 days, based on historical, and I know my crop coefficient, those two numbers together give me an amount of applied water for the next week.
Is that for 1 week?
It's any given time frame. Usually I make my decisions in 7-day intervals. The KCs are for the whole growing. When I mean KC, that's your crop coefficient. That's for the whole growing season, from the time it leaves out to the time of leaf fall. And it's just a measurement against a reference number, which is ETO.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Did you have a question about?
Yeah, I wanted to have a visual about what it means to have, say, per acre, water per acre foot.
Yeah, everything's broken down to an acre, and it's just a. I think your question is what is an acre foot, or is it?
How much water is that? So if you could put it in terms of a rectangle, and what would the volume of that rectangle be?
Let me give you a visual here. Okay, consider 1 acre. Consider 1 inch of that acre filled with water. Now you have an acre inch. 1 acre inch is 27,154 gallons. The average swimming pool is between 25 and 30,000 gallons. So you're looking at 1 swimming pool is 1 acre inch. So obviously, 12 swimming pools would be roughly 1 acre foot. If you had a 150 acre field, let's just use a 100 acre field that we have as an example there, and you put on 1 acre inch, which is usually what a lot of systems can put in 1 day, 24 hours. So you have 1 inch across the whole 100 acres. That would be about 100 swimming pools. That's a lot of water.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good interpretation.
And if you could save 10% of that, you just save 10 swimming pools. And that's only on one field on 100 acres. You've got thousands of acres out there. And every day on that 1 acre that we're talking about, it's going to use 30 swimming pools, 0.3 inches every day. So,
Linda, thank you for the call.
Thank you.
Got about a minute here. Tell us a little bit about how you can get a hold of PureSense. Are you guys on the internet? Got a website?
Yeah, you can just look up puresense.com, and in that is contacts for our sales guys. And that's pretty much it. Just nowadays, it's pretty much the website. You know, you get to the website and all the information you need is right there.
Do you just make the rounds? I mean, are you constantly on the ground checking the ground and making sure that people are satisfied with the product they have?
Yeah, we're actually what I'm doing right now is I'm helping. My goal is, you know, I just got with the companies. I'm helping develop new strategies and new ways of application of our software that can understand again the full irrigation approach. It's not just a probe in the ground going up and down with graphs. There's more to it than that. So a lot of my time is spent trying to develop ways to incorporate things that can make it easier for growers to not only irrigate, but you know, through logistics, through scheduling, just trying to make lives easier. So yeah, go to www.puresense.com.
All right, Dave Jamison from Pure Sense has been my guest this hour. Up next, we'll talk to Fresno County Farm Bureau Executive Director Ryan Jacobson about Farm Nutrition Day. You're listening to Ag Life Weekend right here on PowerTalk 96.7 and AM 1400. We'll be back.
PowerTalk967.com, home of the most powerful name in news, Fox News, on KALZ, Fowler, Fresno, and KRZR, Visalia. Power Talk.